What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it. This is episode 57 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. Actions have consequences. And John Wayne said, because no matter where people go, sooner or later, there's the law. Now, I'm trying to figure out how I can introduce our today's guests by, maybe something they've written or something along those lines. And there's so much information out there written by this person that I couldn't just say, okay, this is the quintessential piece of information this person needs to be remembered by. But with all that information, I recall that I first met him, it would have had to be 15 years ago at a conference. He was speaking with Betsy Brantner Smith. Now, some of you may remember her from episode 44. If you don't, go back, go listen to 44. She's a fantastic person. But I remember listening to both of these two people speak about just everything police. And I went home that day from that conference. When I got home, I cleared my house, my own house, because I was pucker factor 10, because I realized anything could happen at any time. But I figured I need to get this gentleman on. He's absolutely a treasure trove of knowledge in the police world. He's the co-owner of Caliber Press. He's an international trainer, leadership, communication, and use of force subject matter expert. He's an author of Arresting Communication, Essential Interactions Skills for Law Enforcement, and a co-author of the new Street Survival 2. He's enjoyed a 30-year law enforcement career. He served as a commander of the DuPage County Major Crimes, that's homicide for those of you who didn't understand, task force, and taught with Northwestern School of Staff and Command. He purchased Caliber Press, which is a gigantic law enforcement resource online. You can buy books. It's all there. He purchased them, and he has grown to conduct approximately 200 courses annually to cover 25,000 federal, state, local, and tribal professionals, and has now trained over 1 million law enforcement professionals. And with that, I'd like to introduce everybody to Lieutenant Jim Glennon. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me, Ken. It's a great honor. I appreciate you asking.
Absolutely. I guess I'm kind of giddy. I've had Lieutenant Colonel Grossman on. I got a little giddy with him. And you're one of those too. And I don't get giddy too often. However, it is one of those things that I hold you in high esteem. And I think it's cool that you're coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with some of the people that listen to the What's a Hero podcast.
Well, that means a lot to me. It really does. And I'm always humbled by that because, I just try to do my best, and I've been plugging along in the law enforcement world for over 40 years now. So, and I enjoy it. Proud to be part of it.
Right. And it's cool that you develop this stuff and you bring this stuff to people who otherwise they wouldn't. I mean, you're more or less bringing everybody together. You're a kind of a hub of information for law enforcement professionals, for police, and it's on the federal level. So you're talking from Border Patrol to FBI down to your regular cop on the beat municipality. It's encompassing everything. It's such a huge, vast array of knowledge that you have to always be dipping your fingers into to try to get the most up-to-date piece of information to share with everybody.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing about it. My wife, who owns the part owner of the company, she's really the one who came up with really the idea of what is the business model of Caliber Press now.
Mhm.
She came up with that about 12, 14 years ago. And when people ask her, what I do for a living, she says really what he does is research. So,
Yeah.
we're constantly, you have to stay up on everything. I mean, when I first started teaching 30 years ago, it was VHS tapes.
Right.
And we used to literally go and teach a class, and the night before you would queue up your VHS tapes, and you would bring I remember I had a milk crate, and I would just pile these things in there. And we were really good. The instructors around the country were really good. We shared these things with each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And whenever a good video came out, like the Dinkeller video that came out in 1998, that one from Georgia,
right?
Everybody got a hold of it, and then you get a lousy copy of it because it's the 15th time it's been made off of a VHS tape. Well, now, I wake up every day and I go on to, YouTube, and I have all the Google alerts, and I see all these videos, and we're inundated with videos. And because there is such a wide variety of encounters police have with people,
right?
And now that they're on video, the opportunity for training is endless.
Right.
So you can literally watch a 35-second clip. I could spend a half a day editing that for training points, and you could spend a week in a 15-minute roll call discussing that 35 seconds.
Right. So, yeah. And that's the crazy thing is that, and we can stop it. And when we stop it and we pause it, like you said, on VHS, you'd pause something and there'd be the lines in the middle. You could hardly see what's going on. Now you can pause it. You can see, look, this guy was pulling a gun out at that moment, the very moment. And then you can see, oh, this is the look on the officer's face when he saw this because of, whatever camera. It's crazy how far we've come in just that short time.
Yeah, and the editing program, and I'm not really good at it, but I mean, I have an editing program that I can do the basics on, and you can even do the timing in it. Like we showed the Chicago case, Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old, got shot and killed by a police officer. Mm. And when he was shot, he had his hands up, and nothing was in his hands. And so that made the media, it went all over the world. 13-year-old unarmed with hands raised, shot. But 383 milliseconds prior to that, he had a gun in his hand. And when he turned towards the police officer, he flipped the gun behind the fence, so you couldn't see his right hand do that. And as he turned towards the officer shot him. And the variables of that was he was shooting at cars. He had a gun in his hand. He was running away from the police officer, and the officer had to make that decision. Yeah. So we actually wrote an article about it, edited the video in a crude way on my software program. Mm-hmm. I came up with 383 milliseconds. Now it could have been 300 I think it's 338 milliseconds. Mm-hmm. So it could have been 335. It could have been 342 within a small range. Right. But we wrote the article and attached the video, freeze framed the video, still shots of the kid with the gun, without the gun. And 50 weeks later, the state's attorney in Cook County, Illinois, Kim Fox, who is not well liked by the police. Right. She actually, in her press conference, said we couldn't indict the officer, even though she blamed the officer for even chasing the kid. We couldn't indict the officer because he had to make a decision in 338 milliseconds or whatever it was in the article. But she used the exact number that we used in the article. Wow. So we're pretty sure she saw it because, where would she come up with that number? Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's kind of the fun that meant a lot to us that we saw that in a practical sense, because what we're trying to do is teach the reality of making split-second decisions under high stress. Right. Which are what police officers are having to do just every day. I mean, and multiple times a day, not just the one big thing, but multiple times. And you could be on a traffic crash, or you can be on a domestic. Do I go in this door? Is this the door I knock on? I mean, the milliseconds that you have to think about before making whatever decision you're going to make could have lifelong consequences forever. Yeah, it can. And, you know, I've said these things a million times. So sometimes I feel like I'm getting boring, but what I always say is, listen, if you want a job where you can be real lazy and make a lot of money, then become a cop. Because I was a cop for 30 years, and every 2 weeks, no matter how much I sucked, they paid me the same amount of money.
Right.
And no matter how hard I worked, they paid me the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So I was a boss for 18 years and a commander for 15. And I saw, when I first got on the job, I had a guy literally tell me, listen, you got to remember this. They can't shove it up your ass if you're sitting on it. And I went, what? And he said, yeah, listen, you're never going to get fired. Show up in uniform, be on time for roll call, take your lineup sheet, go out, handle the calls in your area. And back then you had to write 20 tickets a month because you work 20 days a month. They figured you could write one ticket.
Yeah.
And I heard it the first day, 20 tickets a month keeps the sergeant off your ass. And I'll tell you something, when I was a rookie, I wrote like 40 tickets and I got in trouble for writing that many tickets. My sergeant got mad at me.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah. He said, you know what 40 tickets is? It's 20 more opportunities for you to piss somebody off that I'm going to have to deal with.
Jeez. Yeah. We had a guy who would sit there, or I knew a guy who said, somebody said, "Oh, what do you got, quota?" He goes, "No, they're not going to give me a limit to how many tickets I can write."
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. So in reality, the job can be really, really boring for a long period of time, you know, and then out of nowhere, you have to make a decision that is going to impact your life, your family's life, and whoever you're dealing with, their life also. There's one of the videos, matter than many videos we show, happened, I think, in 2000, I think it was 2020, September, I think, in St. Paul, Minnesota. And this young officer is at a stop sign in a squad car and thinking about what, is it my turn to go? What am I going to have for lunch? My sergeant's a jerk. I'm just making it up. You might have
right. Yeah. Who knows?
My dog's sick. I got to pick up pills for my dog.
Yeah, we're going out on the boat this weekend. We're going to do whatever.
I mean, that's what he's thinking. And 13 seconds later, he killed a human being. So what happened is somebody slammed it in the back of his car. And that happened to me a couple of times as a police officer. And you always get out and there's somebody going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I just hit a cop,"
Right.
But this guy did it to have the officer get out. He charged him with a knife. And so from sitting there thinking about, what I'm going to have for lunch, 13 seconds later, he took a human life.
Yeah.
And it was a perfectly good shoot, legitimate shoot. But some people did come out and say, well, he didn't try to de-escalate. And I show it. And I even asked police officers, I said, did he have time and did he try to de-escalate? Most say no. And I go, that's not true. He told him to drop the knife 3 times. He backed away from him. He was creating distance. And finally, when he fell back on a curb and the guy kept coming, he shot him. So, but 13 seconds prior to that. So you take that 13 seconds and we can talk about that for an hour in a seminar. What we try to get across is that, things happen quickly. All right. So this officer had to make a decision immediately. He's sitting there in his car thinking about, lunch, sergeant, whatever. And he gets hit by this guy and he comes out to see what's going on. And this man starts charging with a knife over his head. And I ask in the seminars, because 13 seconds after he opens his door, he shoots and kills this guy. I always ask, was there any chance to de-escalate? Did he try to de-escalate? Most say no, but usually there's a few that go, no, yeah, he did. And he did. He backed up. He tried to create distance. He warned the guy several times to drop the knife. Right. Those are all de-escalation efforts. And when he hit a curb and fell down, the guy kept coming. He shot and he killed him. So the thing is, and the hard part about what we're trying to get across, and this is what we're pretty proud of, and there's other organizations doing it too, is we're trying to talk about the science of acute stress and human performance. Mm-hmm. So when something like that happens, we kick into autopilot. So it's the unconscious part of your brain is doing most of the work. And what also occurs during this time is you get something called selective attention. So you're going to have a visual narrowing, which is, people call tunnel vision. There's auditory exclusion, where while you're hearing things in the brain, in the ears, in the inner ear, are picking up the vibrations of sound and words and all that. It gets to their brain goes, I don't need it. This is why police officers, when they sit down and try to give a statement, they are now trying to recall something consciously that happened mostly by the unconscious. It was controlled by the unconscious part of the brain.
Mhm.
So this is why they don't see somebody in the background. They don't know what their partners were saying. They can't remember what they said. They don't know how many shots they actually fired. And often many people believe, well, what are they lying about? Well, they're not lying. The brain just didn't take that information in. But again, it can happen that fast. So it's easy to be lazy as a cop, but then your life can change in milliseconds.
Right.
And we don't train our officers for this.
Yeah, there's an absolute lack of, I guess, knowledge, but then training, and there's so many things that we can be doing better, and so many things that we try to do. We're just limited because we're humans, or we're limited because of time, money, whatever you want to look at, and
Right.
it is what it is. So let's go back in time really quick. Who was little Jimmy? Who was this guy that wanted to be, or did he want to be a police officer? What was
I never wanted to be anything else.
Yeah.
I'm the son of a Chicago cop. He's the son of a Chicago cop. And I remember as a little kid, I must have been about 5, because my dad actually quit after when I was about 6. I remember sitting in a squad car with him with a hat on. He let me drive the squad car around the block. But I'm the oldest of 9, Southside Chicago Irish Catholic. And my dad was making more money 2 days a week on his days off covering pipe. He was an insulator. He was making more money in those 2 days than 5 days as a police officer. So he also wanted to move us out of the city. So he moved us to South Suburb. But I never lost he always told cop stories, and it's all I ever wanted to be. So I went to college out of high school and got a degree in psychology with no intention of using it. They just didn't have criminal justice where I was at, but I was always fascinated by psychology. So then when I got out of that, I did volunteer work for a year in the Appalachian Mountains. I came back and I looked for a job in Chicago. They weren't hiring. And what's funny is a girl I was dating at the time picked up an application for the Lombard Police Department, which is like literally one of the 500 towns around Chicago. Okay. It's just 12 miles outside of the city, and in a separate county, though. It's a different county. And I didn't even know where it was. She goes, well, it's by the mall. I said, okay. So I took the test. I got on, and with the intention of leaving, took a test for the Secret Service. I passed that test. But just when I passed that test, they made me a detective in my 3rd year.
Wow.
And I love that. So I stayed on that. And 7 years later, I made sergeant. I went back to the street for 3 years. Then I made lieutenant, and I went right back to detectives. I ran that for about 7 or 8 years. And then I went back out like 5 years on, I went back to patrol, and I ran the afternoon shift. Was the biggest, busiest shift we had. And I look at 30 years and I can't believe I'm 12 years away from it now. And, but I loved all of it. I didn't love every second of it because I didn't like night shift. I had a couple of bosses I really couldn't stand.
Yeah.
But really not enough to make me ever think about quitting the job. I love the job. I love the people. I love the work. I love the challenge.
How big was it? How big was Lombard?
Lombard's 45,000 people. So it was about 75 police officers, 80 police officers. It's in the middle of, or it's on the east end of DuPage County, which is the 2nd biggest county population-wise. We've got about almost 1 million people. But we're right outside of Cook County, which is about 4.5 million people, and Chicago is in Cook County. So where I'm sitting right now in our office is right in that same area. And if within a 90-mile drive of where I'm sitting now is 9 million people.
Yeah, so you got a lot of bleed over of all this other stuff coming into the bar and whatever, huh?
Right. And I had a chance to do things. I had a great FTO, and he wanted to be my FTO, then my partner, then my boss. In fact, every time he got promoted, I got promoted at the exact same time. I basically took his place. And he told me volunteer for everything. Yeah. And I did. And I had a natural gift at getting confessions. I think that's why they made me a detective. So as soon as I get on, I got a chance to be a sex crimes investigator, the first one. I did that. And then with my partner at the time, Dane, then we became the first arson investigators in the whole county. Yeah. And then it kind of just kept going. It just kept going. I got to do a lot of really cool things.
That's cool. Yeah. You know, I remember listening to you speak at at a street survivor seminar one time, and two stories stick out with me that I remember, that I'll always remember. And maybe you can tell these. It's because you'll do way more justice than I will. But the one story was you had your lieutenant, you had a young rookie, a female rookie, and she was looking for, you just look for a bank robber or something like that. And you told her, just come here, stop for a second, look at that Burger King or something along those lines. And you found, and something that you told her, just slow down because everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off. And you told this one rookie, slow down, let's look at this Burger King, and that kind of reminded you to you need to stop sometimes when you're chasing somebody. You need to just take a look, because it was something about it was that there was the time of day. It didn't match up, the car being at Burger King, people inside there, the person that was not dressed for the weather or something along those lines. And it turned out to be your bank robber or something. Do you recall that at all?
I do. I haven't told that story in a while, so I might even remember it a little bit wrong. But what I remember was the squads were all over the place chasing somebody. And I said to her, let's go into the Burger King. And she said, why? And I said, we're in a chase mode here, but let's slow down for a second. And I said, look at the Burger King. Do you notice anything peculiar? And she says, well, everybody in the Burger King is looking at us. And I said, except one guy.
Okay. Yeah.
And we walked in and he was the guy.
Sure enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So, human behavior is something that it's one of the few things I brag about, is that I was really good at getting confession and really good at reading people. And one of the reasons I wrote my first book was Arresting Communication, about, how to read people. I mean, that's how I remember the story. I don't know if you remember the same way, but I remember that. Yeah.
So along those lines, then the second one that I'll do a training or something along the lines of whether it's active shooter training or bank robbery or whatever. The story that I recall is that there was a murderer that was out, and you guys had a suspect, but you couldn't get a confession out of. And the detective or whatever comes out from the interview room and says, gosh, I just can't get this guy to confess, but I know it's him. You had evidence up the wazoo that this was him, but you need the confession because there just wasn't enough evidence to put this guy as the one. And he comes out and he says, I just don't know. So I think you walked in and you said, hey, did you kill the girl? And he did a couple of furtive movements, whether he brushed his shoulder, looked down, looked away, whatever. And then it says, yeah. And then you walked out. Oh, that's her guy. And then just push him a little bit.
That was, it's a little different than that, but that's actually in my book. And I use that story all the time. What happened is there was a pedophile drug dealer who got stabbed to death.
Okay.
But they still made us investigate it. So we found out that the night before, these three other, low-level drug dealers, mostly pot, were with him the night before. So this is the first case I was in charge of, first murder I was actually in charge of as a detective. So I wasn't a commander or anything at that point. Mm. And we went out separately and we got these three different guys, and they voluntarily came to the police station. We put them in three different interview rooms. I didn't put any of them in there. I was back at the office when they brought these three guys in. They brought them all in pretty quickly, as I remember. So the one in the third interview room, I was talking to another detective, and there were some blinds so at the time we had blinds, and you can kind of see into the room, very small room, 8x7 room. And this guy was just standing there. And I could tell he was standing there. When I looked at him, he was looking at the floor. So I just said, hang on a second. And I opened the door. It's the first time he's ever seen me. I opened the door. I'm just a few feet from him. And I went, hey, did you kill this guy? No Miranda or anything. With that kind of tone of voice, I go, hey, did you kill this guy?
Yeah.
And he looks up at me and he goes, me? No. But what he did is he went, me. And as he went, me, he shrugged his shoulders up, and his hands popped halfway up. So they were down by his waist and they popped like up a little bit. In other words, the thumbs were straight up. So he said, me? No. And then after he did that, he looked down and he wiped off imaginary lint off of his pants.
Uh-huh.
So that happened in a matter of a second and a half. But all the information he gave in a second and a half. And I said, okay. And I walked out and I said to the detective, I go, this is the guy who probably stabbed him. They all killed him, but he probably stabbed him. And that's exactly what it was. So I went back in, I got him to confess to doing that. But what struck me, and again, I've been studying this stuff. What I always say is this: I had a kid say to me in a class several years ago, I want to become a body language expert. Mm-hmm. And I said, you already are. You don't know that. You just don't know it. And he just stared at me. And I said, everything you need to know is housed in the unconscious part of your brain. What you have to do is access that consciously. This is why you read books, you watch videos, you teach yourself something. All of it's going to come to you. It'll pop out at you. Go, oh my God, I've seen that a million times. Right. The one thing I get a lot from we have a class called Reading People. And my other instructors who teach it too. People walk up to us all the time and go, you know what? I've been missing this shit for years. I mean, I see guys do this all the time, missing this shit for years. So what happens when let's say the guy's innocent, the guy's completely innocent. They had nothing to do with it.
Right.
And he's accused of murder. What he would do is look at me with wide eyes, lean towards me. His hands would come way away from his body. His palms would pop up and he'd say, he's not like, no, I didn't kill this guy. Maybe throw a profanity. No, I didn't fucking kill this guy. Are you nuts? He would be, he's being accused of murder. This is a serious thing.
Right.
This guy had no emotion. He said, me? That's a stall utterance. We've seen this all the time. What's your name? My name?
The other no person that's here.
Right. The other garbage can that's sitting next to you.
Yeah.
Those are called stall utterances. And I use them in court for reasonable suspicion. Yeah. Just, what's a stall utterance? That's simple, Your Honor. It's when somebody stalls or hesitates to answer an easy question. And I had attorneys go, is it possible he didn't hear you? I go, no, because he answered it before I asked it again. Or no, because he heard every other question. I asked him the exact same way. So he says, who, me? And then his hands don't pop up. So that caught me. The shoulder shrug was a big deal, even though it's a very, very quick shoulder shrug. That's called a micro gesture. Uh-huh. So when you see a half-ass body language gesture, you have to ask yourself, if that would have completed to fruition, what would it look like? Well, when people shrug their shoulders, what does it usually mean? It means, I don't know. So he shrugs his shoulders as he's lying to me, which is, I don't know if you're going to buy this crap. And then the last thing he does is he wipes away imaginary lint off his pants. And I ask people what that means. And a lot of people go, well, he's unconsciously wiping away the guilt or wiping away his fingerprints or something. And I go, yeah, a lot of times that could be it. But in this case, what did he do at the exact same time he wiped this imaginary lint? He broke eye contact. Yeah. So that was his excuse to break eye contact. Now, a lot of books, I mentioned this in my book, a lot of books about lying say it's a misnomer. It's not true that people look away when they lie. In fact, they'll look at you longer. Well, in my experience, that's true if they know the question is coming. They'll try to oversell it. But if you shock them with it, like opening the door and just saying it,
right,
they revert to basic human behavior. I've always said this: if you really want to learn pure body language, just watch kids under the age of 5 years old. They have no filters. And now I have grandkids and I see them do this. When they lie, the theory is, and I believe this theory is, that people want to hide the lie coming out of their mouth and hide your ability to see it. And how do we make contact with each other? Connection is through eye contact. Right. So little kids, I saw my granddaughter do this when my son asked her a question. I think it was like taking the last cookie or something, and take Jack's cookie. Uh-huh. She says no, and she covered her entire face up with her hands. And she would, no, Daddy, I didn't. And she would open her hands and go, Daddy, I didn't. What are you looking at me for? Daddy, I didn't. So, she's a kid. She's stupid. She doesn't really understand yet. Right. How to lie completely. So anybody can lie with their words. Anybody can easily consciously decide to use words, So you're looking for the unconscious behavior. So a lot of times adults will start to bring their hand up their mouth to cover their mouth, but they know they can't do that. So at the last second, they change it into a scratch. or they'll look for an excuse to break eye contact. And the excuse was imaginary lens. And if you think about that, if you're innocent of a murder and you're being accused by a police officer of committing a murder, is that the time to look for lint on your pants? No. See, so
yeah, especially lint that's not there. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Even if you're OCD, you're not going, hang on a second, let me get this lint off my pants. And we'll come back to this minor thing about whether I've murdered someone or not.
Right.
So it just took me 5 minutes to explain something that happened in a second and a half.
Right.
So what you do is you got to train yourself to pick this stuff up. Train yourself to pick up words that don't make sense, words that aren't being used, words that are suddenly being used, a change in the cadence of a conversation, the rhythm of a conversation, things like that.
Right.
And I found it fascinating, but the reason I found it fascinating is because it was real and it was happening right before me. It wasn't this theoretical nonsense that sometimes we're taught. This is really practical shit. And I look at guys when I teach this class going, I tell you I have a psychology degree and I have a master's degree, and I talk about that too. But if you think this is from some desk jockey who read a book, you're out of your mind. So this is all true, and nobody can argue this out of me because it is absolutely true. You can't look at this as just made up psychological garbage. And
it's from years of actually doing it, walking through it, and interacting with people in a real sense. Right. Not just, you went to college, which is cool. You learned stuff, you read books, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually get to practice it with people and you start looking at people and you start paying attention when you're looking at them, not just I talked to that person and they told me X, Y, Z, but you can actually, you're stopping, you're listening to them, but you're also looking at everything else they're doing. And then you take that back and you start extrapolating the things out of it that started telling you things, and that's where the body language comes in at.
Right. Yeah, I have a degree in psychology.
Yeah,
but I also bartended for 3 years through college, and I learned more about psychology behind the bar than I did in 4 years of reading books.
Yeah,
I learned more practical things about psychology. We were all bouncers. I'm not a big guy, but I was a football player at Division III school. All the football players worked there. And I learned to calm people down just by talking to them. We had other bartenders who would grab them right away, kind of like Roadhouse. You ever saw the movie Roadhouse? Right. But I'm not as good looking as Patrick Swayze, and I don't know the karate as well as he does. But some of the guys would just immediately go hands on. And I got busted up a couple times. I got 35 stitches in my head from a fight. I'm like, hey, I don't want to do this stuff. So I learned how to talk people down. So I had this base understanding. I mean, I didn't realize at the time I was using psychology. It was common sense. But later on, what I did is I combined practical experience with sound psychological theory and kind of combined that. And that's kind of what we teach. So, right. And it worked. And
so what you go through your 30 years, is that right? 30 years as a police officer, and you come to the end where you say, you know what, it's time for me to retire. Would you have kept going if the opportunity was still there? Or did you say 30 years probably good? I don't want to continue to push my
limit. I say 30 years, but it was actually 29 and a half. I probably say that for a variety of reasons, because I wanted to go 30. I would have gone for as long as I could have. I planned on becoming a chief of police somewhere. I mean, that was what my plan was. But then when I started teaching, really the first thing I started teaching was defensive tactics. But then I was asked to, literally what happened at the academy is they asked me to sit in on the communications class. And at the time, I'll be honest with you, it was verbal judo. And they asked me to sit in on it. And I said, why? And they said, because it's getting god awful reviews. So I sat in on it and I came out and they said, yeah, this is terrible. This is all nonsense. I mean, verbal judo is fine, but I mean, it depends on who's teaching it. Right. So I put together my own program that I thought was more practical. That pretty soon that I had chiefs ask me, hey, can you teach it at my agency? And I started teaching that. Then I got my master's degree and I was teaching management at Northwestern University. Then Caliber Press saw me teach in 2002. And actually it was Betsy Smith. Betsy Bradner Smith saw me teach. And we had known each other. Betsy and I knew each other. We were on the same task force together for a while.
Yeah. Because
And
she's
she
an
goes,
old
I didn't,
Chicagoan. Yeah.
yeah, Chicago. And she said, I didn't know you were a teacher. I said, yeah. She goes, yeah, I'm married to JD Buck-Savage, you know. I go, yeah, I heard that. And she said, you want to come on board with Caliber Press? We're looking for somebody to teach street survival. And Betsy wasn't teaching it at that time. So I came on board and I started doing that, and that took off. Mm-hmm. And then pretty soon my wife and sister got jobs with Caliber Press, working out of their homes in Chicago. And I became the custom guy. In other words, if Border Patrol called or ICE called or Eugene, Oregon called or something, said, hey, we want one just for our agency, they always sent me.
Okay.
And at one point, I think it was ICE or Border Patrol wanted me to come in and do like 10 courses. And at that point, my wife was like operations manager. And I said, I can't do 10 courses. I don't have that much vacation time, you know?
Right. Cause you're working top at this time still.
Yeah,
right?
no, I was a full-time commander.
Now, were you training obviously in your department as well? Correct.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I did informal stuff in the department. If you weren't on my shift, you saw videos all the time. We talked about that stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. And I did some other training, and I also trained for the city. But really, I stepped back from doing everything else because Caliber was eating up my time and they were paying better money. So Lisa said to me, she goes, yeah, I want to talk to you about that. She goes, why don't you retire now? And I actually got mad at her. I said, no, because it's not 30 years yet. She goes, well, it's a little over 29, you know. I go, yeah, but I'm going to 30. She goes, why? I said, because I want to go to 30. You know, you max out your pension at 30.
Right.
She goes, yeah, I know. But I calculated the difference between 29 and a half and 30, and it's
negligible.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And you can make a lot of money doing these. And I got mad. I got mad. I said, I'm not going. It was all emotional. So one night I have 6 kids. And I went to my oldest and I said, what do you think if I don't go to 30 and I just teach, you know? And he goes, yeah, hell yeah. You were in a shooting 4 years ago. Why put you through this? You're making a great living on the side. And I was making a lot of money on the side. Mm-hmm. And I talked to a couple other kids, but really what did is I went to my sergeant. I had 2 sergeants. And I asked one of them, who was actually a good friend of mine. And I said, look, am I still the leader I was a couple of years ago? And he said, do you want the truth? And I go, uh-oh. I go, yeah. He goes, look, this is what he said to me. I'm not bragging, but he said to me, he says, you're still the best leader on this department, but you're not the leader you were 2 years ago. He said, you're very, very distracted by the stuff you're doing off duty. Mm-hmm. We're on autopilot. I mean, we're fine. You know, we're fine. The shift's happy. We're doing well. But, you know, your energy is going this way. And he said, I don't want to lose you, but yeah, why not take this opportunity before you?
Right.
So I left and cried like a baby my last day.
Yeah. You know? And I've known guys do that. They've spent their whole life. That's been their life, nothing but police work. And then they break down on that last day. It's like, you know, losing a relationship or seeing your best friend, you know, move away or, you know, pass away or whatever. It's an old cliche, but it's not what we do. It's who we are. Right.
There was a purpose. And then my wife, 6 months after I retired, I was kind of a pain in the ass. I was teaching a lot. But when I was home, I was kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, not abusive. I'm a really nice guy. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. But she said, I think I figured it out. And I said, what? Because I was anxious. I was irritated.
Cantankerous, perhaps.
Yeah, a little cantankerous. She would always say, go work out every day. Go work out. Because that would help a little bit. But she said, I think I know what it is. I think it's because you're not in charge of anybody. And I said, what? She was not the whole I want to be in charge thing, but there were 25 people that you cared about and you were with every day and you protected them. And I did. I was very, very protective of my group. Yeah, I feel like crying now even thinking about it. And I lost all that. You know, I mean, I saw these people every day. I love roll calls. Roll calls is my favorite time of day.
Yeah.
and so that's just that was all gone immediately. In fact, in my last day, the chief said, "Hey, we'll do the whole coffee and cake thing at the village hall, and the mayor comes and all the elected officials come." And I looked at him, I go, "There's no way in hell I'm doing any of that shit. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm not doing that."
Right.
I don't want a bunch of people I barely know standing there, and then you reading crap about how great it was for 15 minutes, and they always invite the chiefs and everything. And I was fairly well known, and I ran the homicide task force. I was first commander of that. I had a lot of friends in the attorney's office, state's attorney's office, and I just didn't want that. I didn't want that without alcohol. Let me say that. So I just said, no, I just want to have my shift. I just want to, in my last roll call, and a bunch of my family members, again, I get this big ass Irish family. They all live here. Everybody I'm related to lives here.
Yeah.
So they showed up, and I cried at my roll call. And then my boss says, "Go home." And I said, "I don't want to." He goes, "You're nuts." So he finally said, "Get in a squad car and drive around until you're done." And I said, "It's a good idea." But he says, "Do not respond to any calls." And my sergeants told me the same thing. For the love of God, if somebody happens, please don't show up. So,
they got to hold you on the payroll for another month after you go through your investigation.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But well, the day before we had a man with a gun, and I went to that. Now we're yelling at me about that. And I'm not saying that because I'm brave or anything. It was just it was what I wanted to do. And so I just went and parked the car and went home. And I had two good parties. I had a party with my family, really, really big, a lot of alcohol. And my shift gave me a really cool party. With a lot of people showed up for that. A lot of the cops showed up, and I got about 5 or 6 letters that I can't even talk about because I'll cry.
Oh,
so
wow.
I loved it. I just loved it. But I really enjoyed teaching, and I thought I could contribute something. So then I was with Caliber for about 8 years, and then a lot of goofy things happened. But my wife came up with the idea of expanding Caliber Press. Caliber didn't want to do that. They just wanted to stay with Street Survival. So Lisa quit with my sister, and they started Lifeline Training because I was teaching communication, leadership, and body language and stuff like that. And they said, "Fine, go ahead and do that." And then Caliber started to falter, so we had a chance to buy it. And I said to my wife and sister who really wanted to buy it, I said, "No, we're not going to do this. We're not buying it. I just retired. We're not going to buy a company. All I want to do is teach. We're not going to buy a company." So we bought the company. Because
obviously somebody had some say and it wasn't you.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, no, I work harder now than certainly as a commander. I mean, sergeants work hard. We don't even know why we have commanders. But most worthless job on the planet. But we expanded from one course to now we have about 25 courses and 3 instructors. We have about 20. And then we actually hired a CEO right before COVID. Scott Burmaster used to run Force Science. He is now our CEO. Yeah, he's 15 feet from me right now. And then COVID hit. And then so now we started, my daughter who works for us. I mean, everybody's freaking related to me, but
you got a big Irish family, of course. Everybody's got to be related.
Right. My sister-in-law, her 2 daughters are our sales team, and they're cracked. They're unbelievably great. But Kristen had a degree in broadcast communications. So the room I'm sitting in now, we have a green wall. We have all this camera equipment here. And we started doing online live classes when COVID hit. But actually, it was George Floyd. COVID hit, everybody shut down. Nobody cared about training. As soon as George Floyd happened, we started getting phone calls. And they wanted implicit bias de-escalation. So then she came up with the idea, let's just record them. And then we recorded it and rent them. So we've expanded this Caliber empire to something I never dreamed of this.
So when you go and what did you like better? Did you like actually being face to face with folks, or do you like the ability that you can go do a video, you can talk about whatever, and then you get to go home that night? You're not having to stay in a hotel or get back on a red eye or something.
No, face to face. But I don't like. I'm done with the travel. I mean, I am. I told them about 4 years ago I don't want to do any more than like 8 a year, and I still wind up doing 25 or 30.
Right.
But this year they're going to pretty much keep me at 12. I love, once I'm in front of a group, I love it. I was just in Indianapolis. I was in North Carolina. I was in Georgia in the last month. And once you're in front of the group, I love it. I love the interaction. I love the energy. I just absolutely adore it. I just hate getting in an Uber in my driveway and going to the airport and then getting your flight delayed or canceled. And,
Right.
you just get tired of that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The online stuff, though, live. I mean, I'm sitting in the same chair right now that we do this. I dreaded it because you're looking in a black hole, basically,
Right. Yeah.
And I've had over 200 on it. Last week, I had 7 on it on a class. But it's not as bad as I thought, because there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot going on in the chat room. I watch the chat thing. If it's a small enough class, I let them pop up on screen and talk. So that went a lot better than I thought it would go. And now I got instructors doing it out of their houses. We send backgrounds to, they sit in front of the background like I'm doing right now. And then the whole rental program, because now you got agencies what's going on right now, Ken, is around the country, the politicians who, I say this openly with politicians in the room, are pretty mindless. A lot of them are gutless, but they're all focused on the same thing, getting reelected.
Right.
So what happens is something like after Michael Brown and Ferguson is when we started doing implicit bias classes, and de-escalation classes were taken off.
Mm-hmm.
And I got called by the DOJ, and they flew me in to talk about implicit bias classes and why they weren't working. And I said, because they're all theoretical nonsense. What's implicit bias? Hillary Clinton said implicit bias like crazy over her campaign. And pretty soon we get calls, she got an implicit bias class. And I said, well, I've been teaching implicit bias since 1992, but we don't call it implicit bias. But what do you want? You want a racism class or implicit bias class? So my point is this. Every state now is saying, well, every year you got to do 2 hours of implicit bias training. Right. Or every other year you got to do 3 hours of implicit bias training. Every third year you got to do de-escalation training. Right? Most of it's check the box nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah.
The politicians who are pushing it don't attach any real training points to it. They don't even know what implicit bias means. Mm-hmm. They certainly don't know what de-escalation means. But they go, oh, I passed a bill that these cops have to have implicit bias training. Well, why? Why do we need it? I mean, literally, I say this in the class, and anybody who's listening, join our classes. I say, implicit bias, what does it actually mean? Does it mean that you have a bias that is housed inside your unconscious you don't know exists? Is that what it means? Or is it just a code word for saying you're racist?
Right.
So I go through the whole thing, and then we bring it into the unconscious mind. We make it really interesting. But my point is that you get all these now after George Floyd. Holy crap! Now there's every state you got to have, implicit bias training, de-escalation training. I've asked, what's de-escalation? What I had a guy actually say to me. He was a trainer someplace. I was coming to teach his agency, and he said, "Hey, are you going to pass out little de-escalation cards?" And I said, what do you mean? He goes, like a card where, if people are really upset, you read it to them and they calm down. And I go, if I had a card like that, you couldn't afford to bring me in.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this.
No, I'd be selling that thing for $50 million a piece.
Yeah.
So they don't even know. You go, de-escalation is a goal. It's not a tactic.
Right. Right. There's not like a hierarchy, like they used to have the use of force pyramid. Right. Where we'd say, okay, we start here. Okay, this doesn't work, and it amps up. We move to this one, and whatever.
Exactly.
And we can't do that with implicit bias or any of this, or de-escalation or anything like that. I remember somebody asking me one time, "Hey, have you had your implicit bias training?" And this was early on, just right after the verbiage started coming out. And I said, "What? I don't know what that is." And they're like, "Oh, it's this, and this, to help you not be racist and help you to not treat people one way or the other." Yeah. And I said, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Isn't that the norm? So, I don't know what your flag terms are, but I know what the concept is, and you don't do it. You don't act that way. Well, have you gone through your de-escalation training? What are you talking about de-escalating? Well, how you can talk people down from whatever hairy situation. Yeah, isn't that what we're supposed to do anyways? I mean,
right.
And so the idea is that, let's say you're the first one on scene and you're talking to this person who's got a hostage or whatever. If you're doing that and you're set up, you're now into it because you've already set that rapport. You don't go changing the tactic and say, but you have to you know, how do you do it? How do you learn that? You do it. You have
Yeah.
to, you pay attention to what's going on around you, the people that have trained you and how people are. And as a cop, you should be able to talk to people. I mean,
Right.
yeah, there's
Right. Now you can
classes.
learn. You can learn to do it. I mean, I wrote a book about how to do it, but you know, like I asked the chief one time, is tasing a guy in the back a de-escalation technique? He goes, "Oh my God, no, heavens, no." I go, "Why?" I mean, if the guy has got a gun, he's threatening to kill people, and somebody can sneak up behind him and tase him, didn't you de-escalate the situation? And he goes, "Well, I get." I go, "That's it. There's a gamut. There's a wide range of what de-escalation means,
Right.
you know." And what is implicit bias? Well, everybody's implicitly biased, but there's implicit bias. Any biases you have housed inside your brain that you don't know exists, does that mean it's going to manifest into, illegal, unprofessional behavior? And if you think so, show me the study that says that, because there's none that exist.
Right.
So what we do is we talk about what it actually is, and then we say things like this. Let's the elephant in the room, male blacks. Do you, because someone happens to be black and happens to be male, do you automatically, unconsciously assign a more dangerous trait to them? And that's what we try to get across. But then I show a picture of a 65-year-old black man with a big smile on his face. And then next to him, I put like this 20-year-old white muscle guy in a, what we used to call wife beater shirts with tattoos on his face. I go, which one of these two people are more dangerous? Which your instinct tell you?
Right.
So, so what we say is, listen, all your biases are in there from your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important to ask yourself, do I have some biases that really have no basis in fact? But I ran across one green person, and that green person was mean. So now all green people are mean. But it's so funny that most of the people, even the activists, were pushing us to take implicit bias classes are some of the most biased people on the planet.
Correct.
Because they literally say, if you're in a blue uniform, you're racist, even if you're black.
Right.
So it's just, but my point is they're just pushing all this training out there. And what we're trying to do is, okay, we'll do the training, but we want to give them practical training that they can use immediately. That's what we always say. Our stuff has to be immediately applicable to street cops.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's our goal.
Where you can take it out. I have this new tool now. I put it in my tool belt, and I'm able to walk out the door and start using it immediately. It's just like the idea that I said that when I went to Street Survival, I was at Pucker Factor 10, thinking about everything, and when I got home, I'm clearing my house because I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Anybody could have been in my house while I was gone or something.
Right.
And so
I'm sorry, we changed Street Survival a lot because we actually realized we were going a little bit overboard. So we show the statistics of how often we actually shoot people, which is just the amount of people that the police shoot and kill in the United States compared to how many contacts we have with them is 0.0018.
Right.
That is the same number according to the CDC. And I just wrote an article about it from VAERS. VAERS is VAERS. And what they do is they track adverse reactions to vaccinations.
Okay.
So the amount of people that have died from vaccinations.
And not just COVID, but you're talking about flu vaccine.
No, I'm talking about COVID vaccination.
Oh, okay.
COVID vaccination. And let me just tell you this, I'm vaccinated and boosted. And I got COVID 2 months after I got boosted. I'm not anti-vax. What I'm saying is the percentage of people that the police in the United States shoot and kill based on how many contacts we have is 0.0018.
Right.
The percentage of people who die from taking the COVID vaccine is 0.0018. They're the same number.
Holy cow.
So in one way, the same people who are saying 0.0018 for the police shooting people is so unconscionable and objectionable that we need to change everything about 18,000 agencies or completely defund the police. But those same people go 0.0018 on the vaccination. Oh, that's not even worth talking about. You need to get vaccinated. And again, I'm not anti-vax. I'm saying people, so it's your bias. It's confirmation bias. That number two, if you hate the cops, that number's too high. But if you love vaccine, that same exact number is fantastic.
Right. Because it's making the difference. But and we talk about how many contacts we make a year or day or whatever the case may be. And then I was talking to another gentleman that was on the podcast just a couple weeks ago. And he was talking about, well, that's Brandon Griffith. He was talking about how even worse heart disease is. And police officers or people in general are dying of heart disease and all these different heart problems. But that is never considered an issue. It's oh, hey, cops are doing this, either it's suicide or they're getting shot in the line of duty or whatever. And those numbers, they're all skewed. It just depends on what you see as what's more evil, and whether it's, and the same thing with how we interact with people. Are we treating people worse because we see them, just like you were talking about the pictures of the smiling guy or the guy in the wife beater.
Yeah.
How do we see it? And then what is more evil to us? And then we have our, hey, I can choke on a piece of steak, but you're at a nice steak restaurant and the steak's really good. Well, that was just a fluke, but he still choked on it and died because you didn't chew it correctly.
Right. No, that's exactly, you're exactly right. Here's the thing. What we try to get across is look at people as individuals, but don't take away your prejudgments.
Right.
Learn how to hone down your skills of prejudgments. Your brain, literally designed by God, nature, whatever you want to believe, your brain is literally designed to jump to conclusions and to infer. That's what keeps us alive. Mm-hmm. But we're afraid to say those, and we're not afraid to say them in our training. Mm-hmm. But what we have to do is look at this training, what's practical, what's going to work out there. The thing is, prior to COVID, on average for 10 years, 50 or 20 years, about 160 to 165 police officers would die or be killed in the line of duty. About 65 to 70 of those were felonious. And on average, only 51, not only because 51 is too high, I acknowledge it, but 51 police officers over a 10-year period were shot and killed. So of the 1 million police officers, 18,000 agencies, 51 were shot and killed on average. Now, last year in 2021, it popped up to 62. But what kills us more than that, by far, is suicides and heart attacks.
Right.
I mean, you literally have a 3 to 4 times better chance of being shot by your own gun with your own hand than a felon shooting you. But we don't do anything about that. The heart attacks. Like, and I'll tell you something, Ken. You need to see if you can get a guy named John Scheinberg. You ever heard of him, John Scheinberg?
I've not, but I'm writing his name down as we speak.
He's a doctor, John Scheinberg. You should be able to find him. He's also a cop down in Texas. He used to be at where was it? If you email me, I'll let you know.
Okay.
But he has done the best studies on police and heart attacks, and he's a great interviewer. You need to get him, John Scheinberg. And he studied like 1,800 cops, and it's amazing how many have heart disease by the time they're 40. It's right. Just
because of what you're eating, how you're stressing. What you're putting in yourself.
Right. Yeah. The average person has maybe five adrenaline dumps a year, where your heartbeat pops up to 180, 200 beats a minute in a matter of seconds.
Right.
Maybe 5, the average person,
right.
Kid runs in front of the car, your heart goes up and all that. Well, how many do police have? Your body's not, right. Exactly. You'll get that in a day. We don't even know we're experiencing it anymore.
Right.
We're so used to it. So these are all what we need to do in law enforcement is start expanding beyond the basic requirements. And some of the things that we really need to be learning are getting pushed to the side because now we have to learn this other stuff. And I'm not saying implicit bias and de-escalation, we have great classes on that. I think it's important, but it's important to actually look at them as for what they are in reality, not from the political standpoint.
Right. Right.
So, and the more you demonize the police, and the more you call them racist, the less people want to become cops. Mm-hmm. The less minority people want to become cops. And the more veteran cops are just fleeing. So now manpower's down. Mm-hmm. The training requirements are going up, but no money's getting injected into the system. It's ready to crash. Right.
Well, I recently read a thing that showed in the past 3 years from 2020 or actually 2019, 2020 to 2021, the number of, and this is Chicago that they took the stats from, the numbers were they were leaving to how many they would hire. They were about even in 19. people retiring, quitting, whatever the reason they're leaving, but then they're hiring. And then the number started just in 20, it was totally different. And then it would be however many people are retiring, quitting or whatever. And then the number that they're hiring was less, maybe half. And then by 2021, the number was so ridiculous that there was, 400 to 600 officers leaving and maybe 190 being hired, way less than half. And so it's just, there's this disparity between how many people are coming back in, because I've talked to officers and it's been, years ago, there used to be standing room only to test.
Right.
Now you're lucky if you get all the seats filled in the place that you're testing.
Something just came out the other day. Chicago has lost 900 officers. They only hired 51.
See, and that's
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're losing 3 a day in Chicago.
And it's not that the guys are getting hurt or anything necessarily. It's that they're leaving. Whether they're going to other departments, other places in the country, or whatever the case is.
Yeah. Somebody I know pretty well quit a very good job, go to Chicago. He was there 4 years. He was the officer of the month twice, and he quit after 4 years. And he said, I just don't trust the politicians that they're going to back us up. Mm-hmm. We did a survey in June of 2020, and only 7% of the 10,000 police officers who responded said that they would recommend law enforcement.
Yeah, I took that. I took that.
Yeah. So one of our most popular classes right now is a recruitment and retention class.
It's huge. And I've gone to career fairs and recruitment fairs or whatever, and it's just hard to get people to, and there's a whole bunch of police departments there, and people are like, well, I don't know, I'm trying to, I don't know if I want to be a cop, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you can't say, well, it's the best job in the world. I mean, it is for you, and sometimes, but when the news media is coming back at you and saying, these people, they're all, you have people spray painting ACAB on stuff, and they do whatever the case is. When you're vilifying those who are giving everything to be there for you, but you're making heroes out of people who have raped, murdered, and done all these horrible things to people.
Yeah.
What are these kids that are so impressionable supposed to think?
Right, exactly. No, the thing is that the activists, I say this very openly, many of the activists are screaming about the things they scream about, want the division to stay there because they make money off of it.
Right.
And they're screaming the cops have to be better trained, and they have to be this, they have to be, they put all these requirements on the police, but it won't work. Now they're actually lowering requirements to get them in. Chicago's losing them so fast. A lot of them are going to the suburbs. Some are just quitting, but the suburbs are paying them bonuses to come if they lateral transfer out of Chicago. So, people keep asking me, when's the pendulum going to swing backwards? I go, well, actually, it already has in many cases, and in some cases, it never swung at all. I have talked to police officers around this country very, very regularly who tell me I have never had my lunch paid for more than I have since George Floyd.
Really?
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. Texas, certainly away from the bigger cities. Mm-hmm. Even in Chicago, I was at a Cubs game last summer with my son and a couple of my grandkids, and I saw these 2 young police officers under 30 Chicago cops standing by Wrigley Field, male and female. I think they were Hispanic, and people kept walking by and saying something to them, and I'm getting pissed. I can't hear what you're saying, but I'm getting pissed.
Right.
And I walk over to them and I go, hey, listen, how you doing, guys? I was a cop for 30 years in Lombard here. I just want to shake your hand and say you're doing a good job. And they say, thanks a lot. And I said, I see a lot of people walking by. What are they saying to you? And they went, they're all saying thank you. So people doing the screaming are not the majority by any stretch of the imagination.
I agree with that.
Politicians say we need to dismantle the entire system. Well, look what happens. I predicted this in 2014, before even Michael Brown. I said, if you demonize the hardworking cops, the result is going to be more people dying. So in between 19 and 20 to 2019 and 2020, we had the highest rise in homicides in the history of the United States in 1 year. It was 30%. Mm-hmm. And the highest rise prior to that was like 1967, which is 12.5%. So what happens? You demonize the cops, they stop working. The criminals realize that you can't chase them anymore. Even in Chicago, you can't chase them on foot.
Right. Yeah. I've seen videos of that.
What's going on? They had over 1,000 murders, or I think 1,100 murders in the county, and over 800 in just Chicago alone. So, Bobby Kennedy said this. He goes, you get the type of criminal, every community gets the type of criminal they want and the type of law enforcement they want. And in Chicago, the criminals they're overrunning the place.
Yeah. I mean, where I live, we get a lot of, we stop at a stoplight, somebody pull up next to you. Hey, thank you so much for your service, or thank you guys, or I get thumbs up all the time. I mean, we just live in that area. I don't live in a big town. I'm not in a big giant metropolis or whatever. But, you get a lot of people that they support the cops, but they don't want to be they don't know a lot of times if they can do that. They can do it to the cops. They can do it to the police at the same, face to face. But to be that one, they're really they're really stepping out when they do it online, or they do it in front of a bunch of people. And it's rare that they're going to, scream from mountaintops, support the police. But they do it, and there's a lot of people that do it. And I think we as police officers need to remember that there are people out there that care about us, that want to see us succeed, and they know that we cannot live in the communities that we live in if we don't have people watching out for us while we sleep, while we're gone to work, while we're doing everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
But
we have to have the right attitude too. We have to realize that we have an unbelievable honor and responsibility.
Yes. Yep.
with this job, and we nobody else in this country can take a life without asking anybody else about it.
Right.
I always say this: you can't look at yourself as a hired mercenary. You have to remember you're honored members of the community. Mm-hmm. They honor you. They trust you with this amount of power. So don't do anything to dishonor that badge.
Right.
And I think that's the mentality that we all have to have. We do start to think, oh my God, another domestic, they're always assholes. And domestics, well, that's where your implicit bias is. That's where your bias is. Every time I go to this house, they're assholes. So they're assholes before you even get there.
Correct. Yeah.
And that impacts how you behave and stuff. Hey, listen, I just got to tell you one thing. I got a phone meeting in about 15 minutes.
No worries. We can start wrapping up at this point then too. So it sounds
okay.
Good.
Cool.
Yep. Here we go. So what is on the horizon for Caliber Press and for Jim Glennon?
Well, hopefully for Jim Glennon, it's a little less travel. I really I've got about 4 books going right now. Uh-huh. And I really would like to finish those, but we're actually, a big thing Caliber Press is doing is we're about to launch a subscription-based program. So in other words, we haven't worked all the details out. We're doing that right now, but we're just going to keep feeding this vault with video analysis, anywhere from 3 to 15 minutes long, of actual police encounters that you can use in roll calls. Just pull it out of the vault, whatever you want. And they'll be put in there by tag words, use of force, communication, de-escalation, implicit bias, things like that. So you can document how often you train. Training should not be once a year formal stuff. The informal stuff in roll call is very, very important.
Yeah,
we have a lot of guest speakers who have come in and they have their ideas and videos of some very, very well-known people and great instructors. All that stuff would be part of this vault, the subscription vault, and then people who subscribe will get breaks on product and breaks on classes and things like that. So we're just about to launch that. We're working on that pretty hard right now.
That's cool. That's cool.
Right,
and so how can people get a hold of you and or Caliber Press or read any of the articles? Because you put out, I read something from you, like I said, weekly or biweekly, and where can people get a hold of that stuff?
Well, you go to caliberpress.com, www.caliberpress.com, CALIBRE press.com. And we have a shop there with many of our books. We do sell some other people's books that we recommend. My books are in there. The new Street Survival came out 2 years ago that Dan Marco, he's a lieutenant from Wisconsin, great writer.
Which I've invited him on. You got to tell him to come on sometime. He said, maybe I'll think about it.
Send me an email and I'll push him and tell him it went well.
That'd be great.
So, and then you can see all our classes, our different options out there. And we just got a brand new website that launched last week. All the articles are there. So
very
just
cool.
got to search for them a little bit.
Very cool. Well, Lieutenant, I appreciate everything you coming on. And I know you go by Lieutenant, you're a commander, but basically your
I go by
persona.
Jim. Actually, Jim is is my
Not
favorite.
not by some people. Some people just talk about Lieutenant Jim Glennon all the time. So at least that's how a lot of people I talk to sometimes. So, but nevertheless, I know you got a ton of things going on, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing just your insight on what it is to be a hero. And I know you don't consider yourself that. However, I don't know anybody that really does it, that does consider themselves a hero. They have to, you spend your life giving to other people, serving other people, so you can make the world you live in better. I think that makes you the hero that you are. So
I wrote an article maybe 6 months ago about that. And I said, I've never used the term because I didn't like it. Cops don't want to be called it. They're uncomfortable with it.
Yep.
But I said, now that I'm actually out of it, not doing every day, then let me tell you people how heroic police officers actually are.
Yep.
I wrote an article about that about 6 months ago, and I was very proud of it.
And I read that, and I thought about my show, and had I remembered about it today, like I said, there was so much information going out there. But yes, I remember that article. It was a good read.
Yeah, and I always end my classes by saying I'm unbelievably proud to be in this profession for as long as I have been around it. And cops are my favorite people on the planet. They're also the funniest people on the planet. So.
That's true. That's true. We got to have that dark humor. So.
But we do. And my son said the only reason I think I ever thought about being a cop is because he used to ride with me and go to roll calls. And he goes, your roll calls are fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I remember laughing. The hardest I've laughed have been in roll calls. I tell you, I mean, where you have to leave the room, go to the bathroom because you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, sir, I appreciate it. You have a great day. And thank you so much for being on.
Ken, no problem. And anything you need to reach out and I'll help you. Check on John Scheinberg.
Okay.
And if you give me a little reminder, I'll tell Dan Marco to get in touch with you.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
All right.
So, all right, sir. You have a great day. We'll talk to you.
You stay safe. All right.
Absolutely. I will.
And Lieutenant Jim Glennon has left the building, and he is obviously he's got a lot of things going on, ton of things that he does for police work, for police officers. He's not even in it, like he said, 12 years after the fact, and he still is just an everyday thinking about police officers, thinking about how he can help those who help others. But like he said, we look at ourselves, we look at things, and you got to look at how you got to be honest with yourself. If you can look at yourself and say, I feel this way about a certain thing because of whatever happened in your life, you can't put that on somebody else saying, hey, all red Ford Mustangs are fast. I know some of you are going to say, nuh-uh, whatever. What I'm saying is you just have that because of when you were a kid, you went really fast in a red Ford Mustang. That's cool. But you can't say it and everybody else comes back and says, no way, no, it's not. And unfortunately, we live in a society now where everybody just dogs on the other person. They feel that if you don't agree 100% with them, you're an absolute pariah and we must destroy you, whether it's online or we actually, they're doing that whole doxing thing where they start figuring out your information, where you live, all this different stuff, and then they start going after you. What the heck is that? I remember a story of Bruce Lee. Let's take Bruce Lee. He was at his house. He was training, and he would actually, as he was going around doing what he did, whether it was making his movies, training people, blah, 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 doing martial arts, people would contact him and come in contact with him, and they would challenge him to fight just so they could say, hey, I fought Bruce Lee. That's how popular he was getting and how unbeatable he had gotten to be, where people were actually wanting to challenge him. Well, he's at home one day. Somebody jumps the wall at his house, comes in his backyard just to fight him. He's got his kids in the backyard. He's doing whatever. He may have been training with Dan Inosanto or the other people that he trained with, but this guy challenges him. He talked about, I recall an interview. It was either with Dan Inosanto or it was with his wife, Linda. And they was talking about how he was so so taken aback and angry that this guy would come to his house around his family and try to fight him there. Who do you think you are? It was basically the idea that he put out there. Well, that's the same thing with this doxing thing. Who are you? Who do you think you are coming to my house and threatening my children because I'm trying to do something that I think is good? People aren't, but you never see people going to somebody's house who are bad or evil and them trying to just ruin their lives. No, what needs to happen, the accountability comes to them, whether they get arrested, whether they get, they go bankrupt, whatever the case is. You look at the Bernie Madoff thing or something like that. Somebody that was actually trying to do something bad, right? This stuff does happen. But when you actually go to somebody's house, and I'm getting off on a tangent here. Why am I talking about doxing? I don't know. Nevertheless, the idea is just because you feel one way, you think one thing, that doesn't mean that everybody feels that way. So you have to kind of communicate. And let's get back to the de-escalation. What is de-escalation? You're basically communicating, hey, let's not do this because of XYZ. Communicate with somebody. Hey, here's why I feel this way or I think this way. And we can get past whatever it is that we're working on. And if we can't agree, then we can't agree. Maybe we don't need to be dealing with it. Maybe we got to do the old adage. We got to agree to disagree. It is what it is. And all those cliche sayings. The idea is, however, you can't hate somebody completely because of what they think or what they believe. Why would we do that? Let's say somebody loves their wife. That's great. You love your wife. Oh, I don't love your wife. I don't think she's the most beautiful thing in the world. Do you think he's going to take that offensively? No, he's going to be fine with me not thinking his wife is the most beautiful. Who else is going to be fine with that? My wife. She's going to be fine me not thinking somebody else is the most beautiful woman in the world. It is what it is. You can't blame somebody. You can't dog somebody because they don't agree with what you agree with. And so the bottom line is it boils down to just treat people with respect. And just like Jim Glennon's been saying the whole time, you have to be aware of what's going on. Use the education that you've developed over your years of life and work towards those things that are going to help others, that are going to be there for others, and are going to do things for other people. Not just for your own self-gratitude, your own self-worth. All that stuff, gratitude, your worth, your value, that stuff will come the better you treat people. They're going to realize this person's a good person and I'm going to value them and respect them because of who they are, because they respect me. So respect yourself, respect others, go out there and work towards the betterment of other people. Support them, encourage them, and serve them. And I've said it 100 times and I'll say it 100 more times. It's hard to put a pinpoint on the value you feel for yourself when you serve other people. There's no equal feeling in the world. So if you want to learn more about what it is on the What's a Hero podcast, or you want to get a hold of us, or you want to be included with everything that we do and know when the next podcast is going to come out or what it's about, you can get a hold of us on any one of our social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, or even the Facebook. And I'm considering putting out some stuff on YouTube. And I just have to, what I would do is it would be excerpts from each episode and I could put them on there. And that might be kind of cool. You guys can kind of see what each of the guests look like, see what I look like. I don't know if anybody wants to see what I look like, but there might be somebody that wants to put a face with a voice. Nevertheless, you can go on any one of those social media platforms and you can ask me questions. You can ask the guest questions. I can get those to them and we can get them answered. You can talk about various things, talk about the episodes themselves. Yeah, they'll also have links to the website. And the website, what is the website? Website is the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. It has all of our previous episodes on it. You can listen to them directly right there. You can stream them. It also has links to every podcast platform that is out there. And you say, everyone? Are you on Spotify? Are you on iTunes? Are you on Amazon? I don't know if I want to say Amazon girl's name, but I could say Alexa. And did she just turn on for you? Maybe, who knows? Or you can listen to us on Stitcher. I don't know if anybody listens to Stitcher anymore, but maybe. But we're on all of those. You can go in there. You can subscribe to the podcast. You'll get a notification when the new episode pops up. And then you can, like it, or you can put in a review of it. You can say, oh, this is the best episode. Oh, this is the worst episode. Oh, your voice sounds horrible, or, whatever you want to say. I might have a little bit of thick skin. I might cry a little bit if you say the worst things, or you might have me reply to it or even talk about it on the episode. So on the next episode, either way, do it, subscribe and leave comments. That's great. So you can do that from the website, the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. Go check out all our social media, and just know that I want to put out the best content that we can get out there for the podcast. And so if you see something that say, hey, you know what, you should do this. This would be pretty cool. Or, hey, you should have this person on. I'm working on getting some really cool people on. I've got a lot of good folks lined up. And I think the information that they're going to be able to give us is second to none. It's some of the best stuff out there. So I want to thank all you guys for listening. You guys are great. And especially those of you around the world. I mean, there's people from across America. Obviously, I've got people from, the whole West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, everywhere in between. You guys are great. I've got people in other countries listening. And so we're getting a little bit of a community here, the What's a Hero podcast communities. Thank you so much for all you guys and all the stuff that you guys do. And to try to make your world just a little bit better, to serve other people, to try to support and encourage our law enforcement, firefighters, our nurses, our teachers, our veterans. Thank you so much. And so along that line, I want to thank all those folks I just listed, our nurses, our teachers, EMTs, firefighters. Without you guys, we honestly wouldn't have the world that we live in. And our police officers, thank you so much for giving back. Today, actually, as I'm recording this, it is during Police Week. And I know I've put out a Police Week episode, but without people willing to serve and sacrifice for other people, we wouldn't have what we have. We wouldn't be able to live the life that we live. If you think that without police, or you think that without the people that serve other people, that if everybody was just selfish, that we would be able to go on and everything would be great, you've got another thing coming. Because without those people that are willing to do that, everybody would just be working for themselves. Everybody would be just backbiting and stabbing each other in the back and trying to get ahead of each other. It's the same thing with the lobsters. I don't know if you've listened to Jordan Peterson talk about the lobsters. He was going by a fisherman who had a bunch of lobsters in a bucket, and one was trying to climb out. And what did the others do? I think maybe it was lobsters, maybe it was crabs. What did the others do as the one's trying to climb out of the bucket? He tells the fisherman, hey, you got one that's about to get away. And he goes, I'm not worried about it. He's not going to get away. Why? Because the others were going to pull him back down. And that's what we do a lot of the times. If we see somebody else getting ahead or doing well, we'll pull them back down. We should be encouraging and helping prompt them up so that they can go become more than what they are. This world is big enough for all of us. There's enough money for all of us. There's enough activity for us to do. Just because you're not getting it doesn't mean that it's, or just because somebody else is getting it doesn't mean it's not going to be there for you as well. So encourage each other, support each other, serve each other. And when you see police officers, understand that they are going through a hard time right now between the media and politics and all that garbage. And yet they still go to work. They still try to make it what it is for other people. So in addition, I want to thank all of our veterans out there who are also on the front lines in other countries, trying to figure out, are you doing the right thing? You are doing the right thing. You are serving your country. You are serving your brothers beside you. And you are keeping America safe for future generations. And I thank you so much for it. So, when you're thinking that you are going to leave whatever profession that you're in, if you're in a service profession, and I mean one of our hero professions, because there's just so much going on. There's so much stress. You're feeling the effects of heart disease, or you're feeling the effects of stress, of night shifts, of working overtime, of going to court, of being called out on the carpet, you're just trying to do a good thing and someone's calling you out on it and saying that you violated their rights or you are committing a crime in and of yourself. Understand that is a rarity, because the big picture is that without you doing that, who's going to do it? Consider the adage, if not me, then who? And we got to consider that. We got to think of it like that. And understand that you do your job pretty well. Those of you that are heroes, you do it pretty well. How do I know? If I've never met you, you wouldn't be doing it. The people that do the job because it's the right thing to do are going to do it well. So thank you so much to you guys and girls out there that continue to fight the good fight, to do what's right. Keep it up. And know that you have our support. So, for Lieutenant Jim Glennon, I have been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.